Hi there.
Hey, Carl.
Joe, we about ready?
Yep, I think so.
Okay. Everybody else ready? All right. Okay, Joe, if we're ready, it's November 18th, 2021. It's noon. And we'll call the regular monthly meeting of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency to order. Again, we're over Zoom. Meeting's being recorded. All board members are present. And first item is some minutes of October 21, 2021. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve them?
This is
Somebody?
Nancy. I move approval of the minutes as submitted.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Melanie seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. That motion passes unanimously. Are there any, Joe, any people who want to make public comments or announcements that are within our jurisdiction?
I don't see any hands raised, Carl, from the attendees on the public side.
Okay. Well, let's go on to the action items. And we'll start with the Midtown Master Plan. Ellen, turn it over to you in a minute, but Melanie, do you want to do your thing here?
Oh, sure, I will, Chair. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that since I am working on this project, you're about to see, I will be recusing myself from voting on it, but happy to answer any questions and of course give my support for all of the work that we've been doing on this. And I'm excited to see this presentation.
Okay. With that, Ellen?
Yeah, what I'm going to do, with your permission, is kind of frame this very briefly and then turn it over to the Midtown Association. Mel, do you know if Emily is with us?
She is here. I just don't know if she has been elevated yet as a panelist. If you don't mind, she will be doing the bulk of the presentation.
Right. So Jill, do you know if she's out there?
I'm promoting her to panelist. She
Perfect.
should be in a second.
Emily is getting promoted.
All right. Welcome and congratulations on your promotion, Emily. So in June, the Midtown Association came before the board and did a presentation on their efforts to put together the funding and define the scope of a master plan for Midtown, with the understanding that they would be back to the board at some point in the not too distant future to request with a funding request. What I'm going to do today is basically turn this over to them to make their presentation. They have a PowerPoint, and then I'll come back in behind with staff recommendation and explanation of our rationale, if that's okay with you, Carl.
That's fine. Emily, are you there? She was.
Lauren Hutchison is also here. She is the board chair of the Midtown Association. I think she can start us right off.
Okay, should we got some sort of glitch.
I see Emily has a video on her name, next to her name, but not a microphone. So I'm not sure
And
if
it's
she.
off, according to my deal here. Lauren, you want to give us a minute here to see if we can resolve this glitch?
Yeah, no, you bet. Take your time.
Because there is a PowerPoint that goes with their presentation, and I know we have that, but I would assume Emily would be controlling that. Unless you are, Lauren.
Nope, I think that Emily is.
That's what I figured.
I believe, yep, she has that.
You could also pull it up if it's something that is attached to the agenda and just move forward through it that way.
I don't know that it was it?
Leslie sent it out just a little while ago.
Oh, right. Oh, that's right.
But I don't know if
I
it's,
saw it.
no, I don't know if it's attached to the agenda though.
But we still have Emily as being,
Muted.
A link to,
She's rebooting. If you wouldn't mind elevating her again when you see her, Jill.
okay.
And she's apologizes.
That government equipment.
That technology sometimes, it gets ya.
well, let's see, what can we do here?
If I don't want to interrupt, I'm okay to start while we get Emily figured out, if that's okay with you guys.
That's fine. I just didn't want to have her miss.
Well, what we could do is we could go to the second item, which is a proceed without prejudice, which won't take long, and then come back to this once Emily's technology is solved.
Well, why don't we do, I was just going to suggest that because she was up and then she's up. There she is. There she is.
Well, it's Still showing on mine as no audio.
It's not working, so I switched to phone.
There we go. All right. Then we're back on schedule.
I'm so sorry. So I do think that I will have to have someone else run the PowerPoint, but I can definitely give a presentation, and I'm here, and I'm so sorry.
Let me see. Joe, I can share my screen, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. That'd be fine.
Okay, or you can. Could you have the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I think it's linked to the agenda, correct, Leslie?
No, it was sent out separately.
It is linked as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So,
All right, so I already pulled it up and it's open in another, let's see. So let me drag this over here. Do you want,
While they work on this, Lauren did want to say a few things before we started that.
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we can start this really quick. I'll be very brief. So I just wanted to start by introducing myself. I was on here last time, but I did not have, my technology rarely works. So I'm Lauren Hutchison. I am currently the president of the Missoula Midtown Association, and I'm also serving on the steering committee for the Midtown Master Plan. And I work for First Security Bank in the Midtown area. So I just wanted to start by thanking the MRA board members for your service and for your consideration in assisting us with this financial support and making the Midtown Master Plan a reality. It's so important to all of us. And this planning exercise is something the Midtowners really have dreamed of for a long time. And it's really exciting to see it so close and seeing it take shape. And a big congratulations to MRA, the whole team, especially you, Annette, on the RAISE grant. We're really excited. These projects dovetail together extraordinarily well. And we're really excited for the opportunity to do something transformative together. And I just wanted to share the mission truly of the Midtown Association. And so our mission is dedicated to the enhancement, promotion, and accessibility to the Midtown area as it relates to businesses, residents, and the community. Our goals are to provide resources and information related to the success and growth of a healthy business community and to enhance the quality of life and place for visitors and residents alike. So one of the Missoula Midtown Association's goals since inception that I've heard about for years was to create this master plan. In the last year, this really has been a reality, has become a reality thanks to Emily Brock. She's the vice president of the Midtown Association and the support of the entire Missoula Midtown Association board and our membership. With the support of the board, we were able to bring on an acting executive director, Melanie Brock, who really has been the face of this project. And we're really thankful that we've had her assist with this project. So while the Midtown Master Plan is going to be managed through the association, we created the Missoula Midtown Foundation, which is a 501c3 organization that has a really close relationship with the Missoula Midtown Association. The association appointed a diverse steering committee with expertise and insight in land use planning and development, the public process, and really community engagement to help advise Mel and the board on this process. Chaired by Emily Brock, the steering committee consists of professionals and experts from both the public and the private sectors. And I really wanted to say a really special thank you to Ellen for your dedication and your support on this project. Your insight has truly been overwhelming, and I have personally learned so much from you as your knowledge really surpasses my highest expectations. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Emily to go over her presentation. And once again, we really appreciate your time and your consideration.
thank you, Lauren. Emily.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks again. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I did this presentation already for you guys. And so I'm going to be mercifully brief and kind of just plow through it. And really, I think the slides are for, we can circle back to them and use them as discussion points for when you have questions. But we're really pleased to submit this request for $370,000 for assistance and funding a growth plan for Midtown. I'm really proud to report, and this is all thanks to Melanie, that we've fundraised almost $200,000 from over, well, it was 36 when we turned in the letter, but I think it's at 38 now, individual local entities to meet our goal and fund the plan. And so we're really hopeful that MRA will join our coalition as our largest funder. And of course, that Ellen will continue to provide mentorship and guidance to us. This funding request would go directly towards the planning team, the planning consultant. And the reason why that's relevant is when we go through the budget, you'll see how this project is maybe a little bit different from some other planning efforts. So also congratulations to Annette. Huge, I just want to back up for a minute and say that there was a time when Annette and Ruth Reineken and myself and Ellen and some other folks in the room were meeting monthly over, I think like 7 years ago or 8 years ago with Midtown Mojo with the idea to create fixed rapid transit along Brooks. And at that time, we kept going back and forth like, okay, should we do the transit plan or should we do the master plan first? Should we do the transit plan or the master plan first? And we decided, we said, we need to push on both. They're both important and we don't want to get caught up in strategy and have nothing get done. And so they've continued to move along and tick along at their own pace. And now here they are coming together in this really, really kind of glorious dovetailing of the projects. The RAISE grant will, really focus on the transit piece and Brook Street. And our project will merge now that the timing actually is like perfect. We'll merge seamlessly with as a broader exercise. And so we're really coming at Midtown, not, holistically and kind of recognizing it as an area that already is loved and people do work and live and play there already and enjoy it. And folding in that work to a comprehensive vision that embraces current residents and workers and really puts them front and center. And so the goals of the project plan, Jill, if you could switch, the goals of the project plan, I already went over with you guys this, and I really don't want to kind of be repetitive, but I guess I will be a little repetitive and not a lot repetitive. So we really want to put people first here. So we want to provide a voice for the people who live in and work in and utilize Midtown. So creating a space for residents, workers, and users to articulate why they love Midtown and identify the things they love about it and what should be preserved, and then envision the improvements that will make it better as it inevitably grows. Because we know that the growth is happening. It's just a matter of managing it. And then equity. So, promoting equitable development, ensuring neighborhood balance, promoting healthy urbanism. Housing obviously is at the front of everyone's minds. Nearby groceries, healthcare, manufacturing, living wage jobs, business incubation, green infrastructure, cleanliness, healthiness, education and growth opportunities, social gathering spaces, recreational opportunities, and mobility. Because and that's where we dovetail so well in with the Brooks project. And then promoting a sense of belonging. So in this sense, the process really is the product here, creating a space where folks can come together and putting people first to envision what their neighborhood looks like is in and of itself placemaking, just the journey and doing the exercise. So nurturing the social fabric of Midtown by promoting positive and diverse human interaction. And then we really want to hone the Midtown brand and kind of put our finger on the thing that we all know is there, but we haven't quite drilled down on. So put our finger on the Midtown brand, drive right-sized businesses to the area, and of course, maintain and attract new businesses that are appropriate. create predictability for private investment. I know that I'm preaching to the choir here that, you know, you guys work with the development community a lot. And when the community has a vision in place, it makes development a lot easier, and it really helps manage change for Missoula residents. And this one just is, these last two really are the, you know, really effort. Sorry, did you say something?
We started to lose you, but I think we got you back. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. So these last two really dovetail with the RAISE grant effort. So, you know, we heard, I want to say Commissioner Buttigieg or Minister or something like that. You know, he said the other day, he said, we are focusing on eliminating and undoing racist infrastructure that severs neighborhoods. And Brook Street really is that. And so I think that between this and the RAISE grant, we are really going to be really well positioned to get some federal funding for a transformative project in Midtown. And then building on the other planning initiatives. So that's just what we're talking about also. So next slide, please, Jill. So this is the project area. The dotted lines are, you know, the URD, which you're familiar with. It is a big area, but and one of the reasons it's so big is that we are putting people first, and we really wanted to include the neighborhoods. And, you know, for the folks who live in Midtown and are really influenced by Midtown, we really wanted to give them a voice. So you'll see that Franklin to the Fort and South 39th Street neighborhoods are in it. You'll notice what's not in it. Larchmont is not in it. The Fort is not in it. We feel like those projects need their own planning effort and are not part of this scope. And then we have some potential study areas, which we'll put this out in the RFP, but it could change. The consultant could come back and say, it could look like a different map, and that's fine. That's the process. We want to kind of give the expertise some flexibility to guide the boundaries. Next slide, please. So these are our areas of study. They kind of speak for themselves. People in equity, land use, connectivity, infrastructure, green infrastructure as something different than infrastructure. Green infrastructure being, you know, we have this kind of big idea that's kind of floating out there to connect the Fort green space with the fairgrounds green space with some trails or green infrastructure. And actually really in the end, you know, really thinking about how do we connect Blue Mountain with Mount Sentinel right through Midtown. So we kind of want to talk about that. Parking obviously is always the you know, most challenging thing to overcome. Business and nonprofit health, housing, and then culture, arts, and history. One thing that I wanted to flag under business and nonprofit health is there's some really good ideas out there for creating a medical hub around community medical center. So not just community itself, but how do we build infrastructure to really have that space around community and around reserve there be a kind of a medical, regional medical area center type thing. Okay, Jill, next slide, please. So the timeline, we are, you know, just wrapping up fundraising. This is our, you know, big push right here. And then we'll go into procurement. Then we'll go into planning, you know, dreaming next in the winter and next spring. And then that'll take about a year. And then go into implementation after that. So I think this one kind of speaks for itself too. Again, I'm trying to be really conscious of your time. So the budget slide is the next one. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this. What we're doing differently here is we are approaching public engagement, public participation differently than in other projects. And this was really what we heard from the community, and I'm working with Aaron Pehan and some folks. in previous planning efforts, the public participation consultant or even the planning firm themselves, that would be part of one contract. We are proposing to do things differently and sort of meet the moment in terms of public engagement. And so we would want to bring on a public engagement specialist, community engagement specialist first, have them on the team, and then dovetail that effort with the planning, the procurement of the planning and engineering consultant, so that it's really a systemic shift that we're trying to do. I mean, it's a bold approach, and we think that it is going to pay dividends. So we're having a systemic shift here where the public engagement is not subjugated to the planning and engineering. Actually, it comes first. So they're on the team first, and they help us select a planner and an engineer. So that really kind of came out of some conversations we've been having as community members, and both the city and the county have equity goals that we're really trying to put up front. The master plan management, that's Melanie. She's our acting executive director, but she's not on staff. So we've raised funds to pay her. And then, so you can see on the top here that it kind of shows the breakdown, and you can see we have, right now, I think we're up to 32 private businesses that are contributing to the plans. And we think that's something that really speaks volumes to how much the community wants this plan. Can you go to the next slide, please, Jill? And so this is them. This is the folks who have contributed. It is broad, and we have folks that have given $100, and we have entities that have given, tens of thousands. And we think that that speaks really well to the coalition that we're hoping to bring together for the effort. Mel, do you have anything to add on fundraising?
I do not, although it does continue. We do have a bit left to raise, as you saw in that budget, and numerous asks still out and still meetings scheduled daily.
So I'm going to kind of leave it here because, like I said, I know that you've seen this presentation before, and I thought I'd pass it off to Ellen to kind of talk about how it fits in with your work. And yeah, Ellen, it's all you. I promised 15 minutes, so we're good.
Well, I wasn't watching the clock, so I'll take your word for it.
You're good, Emily.
It included the troubleshooting time.
Well, no, we excluded that, so you're right at 15.
Yeah.
Not that I was keeping score. Ellen?
So, as you're aware, that we have a number of foundational plans that the MRA has been responsible for developing around the Midtown area, starting with of course, the urban renewal plan, but then the ULI plan called Midtown Missoula, and we've done, infrastructure needs assessment that has been really helpful as we've moved forward with how we make improvements and investments in Midtown. And we've had a number of iterations of how you deal with Brooks, which has kind of culminated in this notion of a really transit-centric Brooks Street that is permanent fixed route transit that can be absolutely transformational, and getting this planning grant from the federal government it's a game changer. And when we can layer that into the master plan, I think we're going to get a lot of efficiencies between those, and also a much more comprehensive look. So the timing is it couldn't possibly be better. I think this is a large ask. It's $370,000. The Midtown group is committed to raising $200,000. They're a little bit short of that right now, but I have all the faith in the world that Mel will pester somebody till they write another check. And so, I think just to kind of put this in context with the downtown master plan, for instance, and we all know how successful those two plans have been. Our investment was much smaller in those, but there were other entities that contributed large amounts of money in the form of the BID and the Parking Commission. And then you had the Downtown Association, which contributed all of the staff time to managing this project. And then there was MRA. And so, I think, our last contribution, I think our two contributions to those two efforts were 100,000 in one and 75,000 in the other. The private fundraising with and we don't have Parking Commission with a substantial investment in this. We don't have a BID. We don't have a Downtown Association. You have a Midtown Association, which is quite fledgling right now and doesn't have the resources to hire staff the way the Downtown Association can. So I think it makes perfect sense that this ask is considerably larger than what we invested in the Downtown Master Plan, because we didn't have the partners for that. For this one that we had for downtown. And quite frankly, Midtown Association has been successful in raising more private dollars for this than were raised for either of the downtown master plans, which is pretty incredible when you look at, the collection of who's downtown and who's in Midtown, and this focused area of downtown that I think is easier for people to get their head around. Midtown, which is huge and extremely challenging, to have raised $200,000, really impressive. I think the goal for the second downtown plan was 150,000, and we probably got close to that. And for the original one was something like 100 to 125,000 private fundraising. So kudos to the Midtown Association for the efforts that they've put into this and the awareness that they've raised in Midtown about this planning effort, just through knocking on doors and setting up meetings. And folks know this is happening. So, and I guess, one of the things that we're trying to do with items that are coming to the board for approval is to demonstrate how they tie back to the city's strategic goals. And I think this plan just nails it on so many different levels. We've got safety and wellness. We have the opportunity in it, which speaks specifically to our houseless population. And this has, Midtown certainly has the ability to provide a whole range of housing options as we start to convert parking or housing cars to housing people. I think the other safe transportation infrastructure is one of the strategic goals of the city. And if there's a piece of infrastructure that could use some safety improvements, Brooks has got to be the poster child for that. It's a barrier street. It's difficult for even cars to navigate across, much less bikes or pedestrians or folks with disabilities. So, and then community design and livability, I think that's pretty much a no-brainer. You've got Emily spoke to this, one of the underlying tenets of this master planning effort is equity and inclusion. And those are, promotion of equitable and sustainable growth are, one of the major goals of the city, along with, and I think this is probably the single most important one that we meet, is a framework for investment of public funds that meet the city's strategic goals and plans. This gives us that framework, just like the downtown master plan has given us that in downtown. And I think one of the things that's going to be really critical is that the Midtown Association is committed to the model that we used for downtown, with an implementation committee that is serious and intentional and will just march down a path and check the boxes as we get more and more projects done. I think the fact that we got this RAISE planning grant funded in its entirety speaks volumes for the degree to which the Brooks corridor proposal meets the federal goals that exist right now. I felt like it would be funded. I was absolutely astounded that we got full funding. I think it speaks really well for how competitive this project will be when we go in for $40 or $50 million in federal transit and highways funding down the road. So Staff's recommending that the board approve the request for a $370,000 contribution to the plan and authorize the chair to sign the required documents.
Okay, questions from the board? Nancy?
I have some comments. The presentation made and the effort that was put into this by the Missoula Midtown Association was very thorough, thoughtful, and committed for all of you folks. I think it's a great presentation. And I was glad to hear, Emily, your presentation too, on running through and defining some of the terms that are used in what the presentation is, such as what you folks have all discussed is the equity or equity projects. Fair and equitable are some of the terms that you used. I'm also pleased that it's clarified that MRA's money is being contributed to the planning and engineering consultant as its own isolated area. And even though the other two areas that are identified for funding are very important, that you've also discussed those apparently at length so that they coordinate with the planning and engineering. So you have your public participation and your master plan management. The steering group appears to be a group of broad interests in that group. I'm pleased to see that the All Nations Health Center is included, and they're relatively new in being involved in projects, and might just suggest that maybe another member of the steering group would be someone who's the so-called designated resident to talk about your residential concerns and perhaps get other people, the people involved that you said are not usually involved in discussions like this. I would like to know some more specific dates for your timeline. I know September initially was the date that was discussed for asking for requests for proposals. So do you have some specific dates on that, and at least date parameters on how long you think some of the studies would be? For instance, how long you think the planning engineering section would take? So a starting date for RFPs and then some timeline.
Emily, you're muted.
We were initially, that's right, we were initially planning on coming to MRA a couple of months ago and getting the RFP out a couple of months ago. We did decide to delay because we had a feeling that the RAISE grant was going to come through. And I'm so glad that we did, because I think we're going to get so much more out of these processes. The RFP is written and it's ready to go. And we have not pulled the trigger and are not going to pull the trigger until early January, because of the holidays. We just know that we won't get the attention that we deserve from the consulting firms who would be submitting over the holidays. And frankly, it's been a hard year and they probably deserve a vacation too. So we are planning and ready to go with the RFP. That process will take, they take a long time. And the way that it's written, it's a two-tiered process. This is the RFP for the planning consultant. There's a pre-screening criteria. So a smaller group, probably myself and Ellen and Melanie and some other folks, will read all of them. If we get like 50 proposals, and we'll wean them down based on this pre-screening criteria. And then we'll bring the pre-qualified firms to the selection committee, and the selection committee will identify the ones they want to interview, and then do the interviews, and then have a obviously the selected firm, and then we would start contract negotiations, but we'd have a backup too in case those fell short. Meanwhile, we're doing a limited solicitation for the community engagement professional. And that will be much shorter because that person / firm will definitely be local. It's a necessity. And so we'll probably do limited solicitation, and that process will probably take 6 weeks. And so by the time we actually conduct interviews for the planning firms, the community engagement specialist would be on board and could help advise that process. Following that, we think there's going to be an 18-month process. I did want to say that the fairgrounds team has graciously, and this is, the people who work for me at the fairgrounds who throw the fair, they're event planners, they have event spaces, have graciously kind of agreed to step up in terms of doing kind of the staffing piece for the activities. So we'll host if we have charrettes or stuff like that, we'll host that at the fairgrounds. My team will be on hand to act as hosts for that, and make sure that everything runs smoothly. So I do think we have the management structure and right people at the table to push this forward.
Anything else, Nance? Okay, anybody else? So I've got a few, Emily, if I could. Is there a model that you're following for bringing on the public engagement specialist first, or did you guys?
Nope, we are cutting edge. We'll be the ones who do do the presentations at the planning conferences moving forward. This is a brainchild of myself and Aaron Pehan and some other folks. Jim Bashand has been really supportive of this route from MOR. I think we can do it. It is cutting edge. We are putting Missoula at the front of being innovative in this way. We've seen success in the Scott Street West Side plan. It wasn't quite like this, but it kind of had an outside group doing a lot of the engagement. We know how great Spider did with the downtown, but the feedback that, we got was that, it really shouldn't be underneath the planning team. You end up having it subjugated. We know there's going to be some natural tension. We're okay with that. We're embracing that. We think that's a good thing. We think that's part of community discussion, and we're up for it.
Okay. My second question, and these don't necessarily, now I presume the RAISE grant, maybe this goes to Ellen or Annette, the RAISE grant has a steering committee, right? And so are there common members to?
I think, yeah, I'll let Annette chime in, but I definitely have been meeting with Laval and Erin, and we're planning on creating a space where, Laval and Annette and I can meet very regularly to ensure that we're not duplicating efforts, and that we're, especially on the public participation, that we're not overwhelming folks or confusing folks. And we've kind of been shooting around the idea of infographics and, how can we make this more clear for folks? So I'm jumping a little ahead of Annette because, we just found out about the RAISE grant, but this is stuff Laval and I have been talking about a lot because they're doing the code reform.
And is there enough, Annette, or is there enough flexibility in the requirements of the RAISE grant to where you can, decide to do common graphics or things like that? I mean, or is the tail gonna, or you know what I'm asking?
I think I know what you're asking, Carl. The short answer is I don't know yet, because we haven't had the formal official conversation with the FTA yet. But when I wrote the application, I was very clear that the Midtown Association was moving forward with a master planning effort, and that making these efforts occur at the same time was really an advantage to everyone. And as Emily was making her presentation, the wheels in my head were saying, we should be doing this together. We have built into the RAISE grant and the Brooks TOD sort of, as we're looking ahead on how that progresses, that we know we need a really robust public outreach as part of that. And I can see that these two projects are so intertwined that I can see that doing that as an effort concurrently will pay a lot of dividends. And I really applaud you, Emily and Melanie and Lauren and everyone who's been involved in putting this master plan effort together to put the public engagement at the front. I'll speak later in this meeting about the West Broadway master plan, and that I learned a boatload through that process, working with the crew neighborhood group in the North Side, West Side, and getting that public engagement, especially people who typically aren't involved in the public engagement process. And we learned just a boatload from folks. And at the end of the day, we were very satisfied to find out that we were on the right track. But I think that we would have streamlined the process if those voices had been at the table at the beginning.
And is it, and I know you don't know all the answers to this, but is it, I guess, first of all, possible or probable that you'll be able to hire the same consultants to do similar work? I mean, I could see, like, for example, public engagement, you know, if somehow or another it's not possible that you end up hiring both, so you've got two different theories of public engagement going on in one area and the public completely confused about how they participate in one versus the other.
I think we can definitely work together on the public engagement piece, and that's why having these contracts, you know, when you do the contracting and you do the scope of work, that's when you work this stuff out. Okay. The fact that they're happening at the same time means that we can really do more and do more coordinated.
Mm-hmm. So really the answer to that question is essentially that is how you're writing the RFPs, right?
Exactly. And the thing is, some of this money, and the reason why it's outside of the planning and engineering consultant, you know, one of the main reasons is that, you know, there's a best practice that's used to pay folks for their participation. Probably everyone on this call, you know, has showed up at a charrette at some point, whether it's for work or because we're interested or because it helps our professional development or because a plan improves our property values. We are all paid as sort of people who participate in this stuff normally. Folks who are of more have irregular schedules, have childcare issues. I mean, there really is a best practice here that's emerging to pay folks for their time. One idea that's been thrown out there is the public engagement consultant, you know, then has sub-consultants who are actually neighborhood liaisons who are your vocal neighbors, and they're not neutral, right? They're going to go knock on doors and do what they're going to do. And that's okay. And they're not, you know, but you're still paying them for their time and paying them to drum up energy for the project and just see where it goes. And it can be scary, but that's the point, is that we don't really know everything. And, you know, like I said, we're just kind of, we're up for it. You know, we're up for hearing what folks have to say. So there's a lot of different kind of models out there. And we're going to, in the RFP, really encourage the proposers, the community engagement folks to, they should tell us what works. You know, they should tell us what the best practices are and what they think will work in different neighborhoods. And it's going to be different for every household, frankly. And so we have a lot to learn. And, we're just really trying to keep an open mind. And I think, yeah, for the public engagement piece, it's critical that we work together.
Okay. Well, so my point is that, one of the things that we're always pushing for when we fund these kinds of things are deliverables, and deliverables in a timely manner. And so I don't want to take away from that. But on the other hand, it seems to me that if the essence of making these two separate things work together is in the writing of the RFPs and the raise grants behind you, because, as we only just found out about it, that maybe you, I hate to say this, slow down a little on issuing things until we're sure that Annette and their folks can write their RFPs that dovetail with yours.
Yep.
And I'm not telling you you shouldn't. Don't get me wrong, Emily. I'm not, but
Yeah.
Just think about that, because I would sure hate to see a duplication that causes confusion and then affects the results.
Yeah, absolutely. We will point taken.
Yeah. So my next question is, when you mentioned that the golf course isn't in, and that the separate planning and all that stuff going on, has there been any sort of movement on the county to say, well, maybe we could dovetail
No,
onto your work? Okay.
no.
All right.
That is a brand, we are just kind of thrown a proposal this fall that is kind of
Right.
knocked us back a little bit. And just in terms of like, okay, we're developing a work plan for that. And
Okay.
the commission wants to maintain needs to maintain their full decision-making power and public process authority.
Well, and then last but not least, let me just say that, as someone that's been around since that Erd 3 was established, it seems like we've been waiting for, a lot of stuff has happened, a lot of good stuff's happened, but we've been waiting for the big stuff. And it apparently, because of all the prep work that you guys have done, apparently that's bubbled to the surface in the same week. And it's kind of remarkable, and I compliment you on it. Jill, did you have something?
I think Annette had her hand raised briefly, and then I've got two people, public attendees that have their hands raised. Just want to let you know.
All right. Annette, did you have something to add?
I was just going to make the point with the public engagement that the scope of the Brooks Corridor project will be very focused on the corridor and those issues, and they're not unrelated to what the master plan is doing, but we'll have a more defined scope.
Okay, Nance?
Before we have public comment, I would like to just say how this discussion actually sort of makes a circle with the aims of MRA and of the city, which are stated on the cover sheet and are really part of the discussion and part of the consideration for this, especially the advancement of the city of Missoula's strategic plan goals and public purpose, the safety and wellness and community design and livability, and the creation of and recognition of housing and employment opportunities that are goals and also hopefully products of what's happening in Midtown.
Okay. Melanie, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to go back to your question, Chair, that taking west of Reserve off of the table, we did through this process knock on a lot of doors, because what we didn't want to happen is a year after this RFP goes out and the team comes on, someone says, why didn't you think about adding this to the scope of this project? So we did talk to other boards like the Parking Commission, and there wasn't any synergy of what needed to be studied coming from their lane and their strategic planning. We did talk to almost everyone we could possibly think of to make sure that we weren't missing anything that needed to be a part of this. And the steering committee was very thoughtful with Ellen's advice. Having Ellen part of this planning process was absolutely so beneficial. But we are confident that we are going to go out into the field with the right size project with the right components after talking to everyone we could possibly think of to talk to.
Okay. All right, anything else? Any other questions? I think we've always, oh, I'm sorry, Ruth?
Just a comment that my lack of comment so far has nothing to do with my lack of interest. I appreciate everything Nancy said and would repeat it, but she said it so well. And I would particularly like, well, two things I really like about the Midtown master plan here is the public engagement that's happening in front of the engineering study. I think that's brilliant, and I hope it becomes a pattern. I also appreciate that the Midtown master plan boundaries are so far beyond the urban renewal district. I think that's going to be important for Midtown in engaging all of the residents in that area. So congratulations on that.
Okay, anything else? I know we have some public comment, but let's have them comment on something that's before the board, which would be a motion. Is there a motion on this?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, the staff recommendation.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
Carl, I'd like to second the motion, but maybe with some slight changes to the motion itself so that the motion is, and if you accept the additions, motion is that the MRA board approve the request from the Missoula Midtown Association to provide funding for planning/engineering consultant for the creation of a Midtown master plan in the amount of up to $370,000 and authorize the chair to sign the required agreements.
Ruth, do you accept those changes?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's the motion and Nancy seconded?
Yes.
All right, so let's see if we have some public comment. And we do. So Jill, do you want to?
Yep, I have Jane Van Fossen is at the top of my list, so
Okay.
I'm going to allow her to talk.
All right.
Jane, you should be able to talk now.
Yes, my question's a very limited one. As I read the Missoula Midtown memorandum, which talks about goal 6 being building on planning initiatives, there's a reference to a recently adopted comprehensive economic development strategy. And I was wondering if I could get clarification on that. I tried to do a search of both county and city websites and couldn't find it. So Ellen, I'm sure you know it all, so please help me.
That's the study that was recently completed by Missoula Economic Partnership and has been accepted by the federal agencies that would use that kind of strategy, the EDA primarily, which then opened up the opportunity for regional economic development grant opportunities. So that was an effort of MEP, which is why you would not have found it on necessarily the city's or the county's website. But if you go to Missoula Economic Partnership, I think you can find a link to that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And thank you. Anything else?
Yes, so the next person with their hand up is Matt Larson.
Okay.
And
Yes, this is Matt Larson, Ward 3. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you for the presentation and all the research. This looks promising to me, I think, but I'd like to know if the Affordable Housing Trust Fund or the Jedi Council are involved. Um, and I also want to point out that I think it would be good to include west of Reserve, seeing as how Missoula's kind of overall transportation plan for cars is pushing everything to Reserve, and Reserve is got issues with traffic. So I think what we're seeing here again is like the strategic building up of certain locations, which is in theory good, but I think we're picking some of the wrong locations to build up. And I think we could be looking as a city and a county at the target range area, which is a lot of space and has been zoned by the county as ag, basically small ag. So I'm just wondering where the overall equity works with Missoula as a whole when you're dropping this massive tax projects or tax-based funded projects in historically low-income neighborhoods like the Scott Street development and Bellagio on the north side. You are encumbering a lot of tax on a lot of these people that have lived here for however long and paid a lot less tax prior. So I think we would behoove ourselves to involve the Jedi Council or whatever that's called and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as well as west of Reserve, because it just doesn't make sense to just slough off everything at Reserve and no one has a cohesive image or imagination for the entirety of Reserve or the entirety of transportation to and from Missoula in general. We need like a bypass, like the South Avenue bypass. We need some sort of relief from Reserve Street. So we should probably encompass everything around Reserve Street in this planning, especially if you're going to drop a bunch more cars there by dropping a bunch more people there. That's just like the nature of this as it exists now, currently, not in the horizon. But that's just me. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentation.
And thank you for your comments. Jill, Gwen
Yep.
Jones?
Yes. Go ahead, Gwen.
All right, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Lovely, good to see all of you. And I just thought I'd put my 2 cents in, and I guess it's, on one hand, I've sat through a lot of meetings as Emily's gotten this all queued up, Emily and Melanie and Ellen, but also, I guess you can call it public comment, but I just thought I would put my 2 cents in, which, first of all, I really appreciated, Nancy, your comments. This master plan does go to so many overreaching goals. And on the other hand, I every election season crystallizes issues, and you always think, well, what's the takeaway? And more so than ever, I think my takeaway after this election season was, once again, it's not only housing, it's housing with a capital H. It's an acute situation. So when I look at this plan and all of the things that it addresses in such a holistic fashion, and I won't say all of them that were listed, but infrastructure, parking, connectivity, equity, business development, housing is one of those. But what I wanted to convey, I think, with a city council viewpoint, was we need housing, and as a component, we need affordable housing. But I think we want to do it right. We want to create a good livable quality situation in which there's a high quality of life, and we enhance Missoula. We don't just create more living units, but we create a good situation where people can have a good life. And that's what I see this master planning process. It'll accomplish a lot of things, but one of my priorities is housing that's good. And if we have good housing in a good livable situation, to me, that goes to equity. So I guess what I'd say is we can't afford to not do this. So I'm very much in support of it, and timing is excellent on so many fronts. I know this moves slowly, and it'll be a couple of years before we really get traction in terms of action based on this. But I see from the viewpoint of city council, you know, we do projects. We've got great specific projects. This is a far more sweeping action that will lay the foundation for really big changes on so many levels, including housing. So thank you for all of your work on this, and I'm very much in support of it. Hope you guys pass it.
Thank you. All right, anything else? Tasha?
I would just comment that it'd be nice. I understand that this process is going to be lengthy and it will take time, but it would be nice to have a status check-in with us sooner than 18 months. I know that I know I'd be interested. I think all of us would be interested in seeing how this progresses. And so I'd ask that perhaps you come back at a time that makes sense, but sooner than a year, to me would be really helpful.
I think that's yeah, it's always, and you know, with the coincidental tie-in with Melanie, that we can probably assure that that's going to happen. Nancy?
I agree, and we should definitely have a presentation at the point that there is a contract for the engineering portion of this.
And even before that, if there's some mention of how the two things are working together, that would be of interest too. So
I agree.
And it doesn't have to be a whole big shebang, just something that tells us this is how we're doing it. And then a more formal, probably larger one once contracts are out. Does that make sense?
And I will include status updates in the director's report as appropriate as well. So yeah, I think you guys are going to be pretty well informed.
Okay. All right. Anything else? If not, we've got the motion, we've got a second, we've got all of the public comments. Anything? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Emily, thank you again for your
Thanks so much.
spectacular work. And we'll look forward to hearing more as it progresses. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Moving on. 124 North Higgins, request to proceed without prejudice. Annette.
Yes, thank you. So Karen and Brian Sippy have purchased the property at 124 North Higgins Street, which is, it's currently the M store is a tenant there. It's immediately adjacent to the Radius Gallery, which Karen and Brian also own. And they have plans for 124 North Higgins, but they're not quite ready to they want to get started in the interest of trying to keep costs and schedule. So I'm going to let Brian speak maybe just a little bit more about what their request, and then I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Brian.
Hi.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you guys. Thank you for having us. Annette, thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate all the MRI board's time. Yeah, so we've been approached by Carl and Annette Rummel, who owned the M-Store building and the business. Without the Grizz playing last season, financially, they were struggling. And so what we were able to do is work with them by purchasing the building, basically infusing some cash into their enterprise. They were able to weather the storm, keep their staff, and then when the Grizz announced that seasons would be played again, we were able to extend their lease to next week, basically at the end of football season. And that's helped them really heal their business to a point that I think it's been purchased now or is under contract to be purchased. And the company that's going to buy the business has also I believe, identified already a place downtown or near the downtown to house the M store. So I think we've been able to save, quote unquote, the M store, and it should maintain a presence downtown. And the MDA was hopeful that with that foot traffic and buying during home games and things, that would continue in the downtown region. So I believe that's where we are. I haven't heard formally from Carl and Annette that everything's settled, but at least last week it looked good. Okay, so then this building again is kind of a mid-century concrete. We've done all the engineering, and our intention is not to be as kind of bold as we were at 120 and take everything down to the foundation. This has a little bit better bones, and so what we hope to do is increase the attractiveness of the facade and kind of get rid of that dark 70s kind of hole and bring more of a storefront forward. And what we've been able to do is work with Don MacArthur's group again at MMW. We basically got the band back together. It's going to be Western Interstate and the same crew. And so what we've been able to do is find some of the old images actually of the 1920s and 1930s facade of 120 North Higgins, which was the R.H. McKay Art Company. And since we've destroyed that, or it was destroyed in a fire and we didn't rebuild it, we're going to take advantage and take that facade essentially next door. So we'll have the pharmacy building, Old Burke Pharmacy. We'll have a preserved property with a contemporary building that matches the pharmacy. And now next door, we'll have a building that's basically of the ilk of the old post, that type of timeline and that engineering and that masonry. So that's all been approved now by the City Design Excellence Committee. And we plan to take the building over on December 1. And we would like to start our deconstruction immediately just because of supply chains and winter time. And again, that was then the idea that we might be ahead of our request in the deconstruction, therefore the request for proceeding without prejudice with that phase of it.
And Brian, when do you think you're make the request?
We can be prepared for your next board meeting if that's appropriate, if your agenda will allow, at the very latest, the January.
Okay.
We could have almost been ready for you now since the city did approve our design, but I wanted a chance to, we were assigned to Chris last time and now we just got assigned to Annette. And so we wanted time to be able to speak with Annette too and just kind of get our proposal together for you.
Okay.
So we were hoping just a month delay or so, if that's
all right. Any questions? If not, is there a motion? Somebody?
Well, yeah, I will move the staff recommendation and just to get it into the official record with the knowing that Brian, so I'm going to move for the staff recommendation. I just also want to state that that of course Brian understands that there's no guarantee by approving this proceed without prejudice that the project itself will be funded.
Okay, is there a second?
Thank you.
I'll second it.
All right, Melanie seconded. Any additional comments? That was the one comment, Brian, you know, but you get it. And
yeah,
it sounds like a wonderful project. So we're looking forward to seeing it. And I'm not a betting person, but I'm willing to bet that it will be favorably considered.
I appreciate y'all very much.
In light of your track record and in light of the fact that you're, what did you call it? Getting rid of the dark 70s hole. I mean, that's gonna, how could we argue with that? Huh? All right, anything else from anybody? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. Motion passed unanimously. Brian, it's nice to see you again. Looking forward to seeing you next month. And of course, you're welcome to stay, but there's no requirement.
Okay, I appreciate it.
So as we move on our agenda. Thank you, sir. All right, West Broadway Master Plan. Annette, you're up again.
Great, thanks. So I'll be pretty brief. I do have a brief presentation of the master plan itself. Today, the master plan has been, final draft has been completed, and we are in, we've gone through the public process, and we are beginning approvals process. We're trying to get, hope to have it approved and completed by the end of the year to meet a Big Sky Trust Fund grant requirement. So let me give just a brief presentation of the master plan, and then you can certainly find a lot more information on the websites. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so the master plan funding was provided, MRA provided up to $65,000, and then we were successful. The Downtown Improvement District was successful in obtaining a $25,000 Big Sky Trust Fund grant. So MRA's commitment is $40,000. The steering committee for this project has been a really broad steering committee. We've had business and property owners, the city administration, 3 members of city council, the key players in the community planning and development and innovation department of Public Works, of course, our consultants, Dover Cole, the MEP, the Business Improvement District, MRA, MDT, and the neighborhood, the North Side, West Side neighborhood. We also talked to a broad number of stakeholder groups, the business and property owners, neighbors who live in the area, developers in the community, educational and social services providers. There are quite a number of those in the area, financial lending institution, housing advocates. Gwen is right in her statement that housing is a top of mind issue for everybody in the community. A lot of neighborhood residents, and then our technical committees, parks, environmental, transportation, public safety, tried to get as broad band of input as we could. The planning process, I'll just quickly go through that. We kicked off with a steering committee meeting in March. The formal planning process started on April 5th, April 5 to 9, virtual design charrette. Dover Cole was prepared to come to Missoula in person, but COVID squelched that. So they've become very adept at doing this virtual process, and it was pretty effective. We were able to squeeze in 3 in-person opportunities during that week. One was at the Poverello Center, one was at Western Cider, and then one was in downtown Lions Park, right across the street from Western Cider. We put together 2 project websites. Dover Cole put together custom Envision West Broadway site that has the opportunity for questionnaires and a broad way for people to engage directly with the project. And then we also put information on the Engage Missoula site. We, at the suggestion from the crew group, we put hard copies of the plan at both the draft plan and then this final draft at the library, Lowell School, and NMCDC to try to reach people who don't have easy access to computers, because unfortunately this whole planning process has been very virtual. And then we tried to use social media and direct emails to people who had been participating to continue to try to get the information out. An information booth at the North Side, West Side block party. We had virtual input sessions, so public engagement sessions at on October 7th on the initial draft, and then November 9th on the final draft. That's out for circulation now. The crew group also felt they did really wanted to do a really broad engagement of folks who don't necessarily get involved in planning processes like this. And so we worked with them to put together a survey specific to this initial draft that was out. And they took it door to door really focused on the neighborhood adjacent to the study area, and gleaned really, really good information, really useful information. And they about 66 respondents directly just for that survey. And then a lot of direct communication. We encouraged a lot of communication with the planning team. People contact me, contact Dover Cole, contact BID, whoever they're comfortable contacting. So this is just a quick the project timeline.
If I could interrupt for just a second, could you tell us what the CREW group is?
I'm sorry. Yes, CREW is it's an acronym for Community Rising Through Equity and Wellness, and they are a essentially community organizing, community advocacy group, really focused on the North Side, West Side neighborhood. I think they operate outside of the city's neighborhood forum. I think that they're really focused on really direct community advocacy and community organizing. And really advocating for people who don't typically get involved in planning processes like this, folks who are really busy working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep a roof over their head, and so trying to reach them. And one of you may recall that we had expected to have this master plan wrapped up in early October, completely finalized. And over the summer, this CREW group reached out, and some members of the CREW group do sit on our steering committee, and they reached out and said that they felt that we just hadn't reached as many people in the neighborhood as they had hoped, and asked if we could slow down the process to make that happen. And so we did slow down the process. We asked the Big Sky Trust Fund if we could extend our deadline to the end of the year. I think their deadline was, they had wanted it completed by early October. And we were granted that request so that we could have this time to do this specific survey with CREW and some of the other more detailed and customized engagement that they were asking. And it really drove home for me the value of putting this public engagement at the beginning of a process, and really focused public engagement in the way that Emily and the Midtown master plan process have been talking about. So does that answer your question, Ruth?
Yes, thank you very much.
So if I could add to that just for a little more context, CREW grew out of the North Missoula CDC. 2 of the key members who are also on our steering committee are on staff on Bob's staff at North Missoula Community Development Corporation, and their role there is community outreach.
Okay, Nat.
So we've reached well over 340 people through our directly. So we've spoken with them through our outreach efforts. The master planning process, Dover Cole, begins with this one-word survey, and of course the words that come in the most often get in this word cloud become the largest in size. And so the potential, but it's forgotten, a lot of homeless activity, dumpy, floodplain, sketchy. and then did a one word cloud at the end of the planning process. And the words that really popped out as we, on the draft plan that is out being reviewed right now, gateway, community, river, affordable, accessible, a lot of really hopeful words. Community image survey that kind of kicked off the planning process. The work in progress presentation at the end of the first 5-day charrette, and affirmation that on the right track. And so kept going with the ideas that came out at that charrette. At the end of the charrette, about 80% of respondents said that they felt that the plan was on the right track or probably on the right track. And at the October public input session on the initial draft, same number felt still that the plan was on the right track. A lot of public engagement as I had gone through, about over 2,500 unique visitors to the website. And so we feel pretty comfortable that we've reached a pretty broad band of folks. The neighborhood survey that I talked about, I think it was really interesting to us. About 80% of the folks who responded to Crew's, the survey that we put together with Crew, about 80% said that they had not participated in any previous activities with this planning effort. But about 80% said that they felt that this was on the right track and they could see themselves living in or near this area if it developed the way that it was proposed in the plan. So that was really encouraging to get that feedback. I'll just go really quickly through the highlights of the plan. So just a reminder, it's about a 15-acre site. Bounded by North California Street, West Broadway Street, North Russell Street, and the river. The reason that we undertook this plan now, it was covered, included in the downtown master plan at a really high conceptual level, but a lot of the concepts that were proposed in the downtown master plan have carried over into this more detailed master plan for the area. Since the downtown master plan, the city purchased the Sleepy Inn site, and there's been and the city has also purchased a couple of properties adjacent to the Missoula water site. And there also is now a defined plan for the Missoula water to move off-site within the next 3 to 5 years. So the city owns a significant portion of this planning area, and it seems, and that gives the city a fine amount of control over development, future development of the area. And that was the impetus for including this, or getting this master plan going. 5 big ideas of this master plan: build the next great Missoula neighborhood center, be a good neighbor, respect the local businesses that currently are on site, connect to the river and complete the Ron's River Trail Pass system, help solve housing and commercial space affordability issues, and create a unique entry experience or gateway experience to urban Missoula. I won't dwell on the ideas because I think that if you go to the master plan, you'll have more time to scrutinize them. But building the next great neighborhood center, there was a lot of interest in makerspace and light industrial. Some of those activities already occur on the site, and interest in encouraging activities similar to that. Making it a walkable neighborhood center. So really the street fronting buildings, generous and comfortable pedestrian experiences, street trees, all of those sort of complete street urban planning strategies. Creating a main street. This is a really big design move in the master plan. So creating a big public urban square and Main Street, a little bit offset from Burn Street. Most of this would occur on the property that the city owns, the Missoula water property. I'll just quickly, the street sections, some of the existing streets, enhancing those street sections so that they become these walkable and inviting public urban spaces. Big idea two, be a good neighborhood or be a good neighbor and respect the local businesses that are currently on the site. So not encouraging businesses to develop as is appropriate for their individual business, but encouraging this area to become a local destination through the survey that we did with Crew, just reinforcing some of the desired activities or businesses in this area. Might include restaurants and cafes and breweries, daycare figured highly, not surprisingly, personal services like laundromats or hairstyling, community space, some public community space, incubator and maker space and shared kitchen space, corner store or grocery. And there was a lot of interest in creating some spaces for the creative arts in some way, which is simpatico with the maker space and some of the shared uses. Support small and local businesses and encourage local ownership for the new either existing or new businesses that would be located in this area. And so the master plan includes some strategies for how to do that. Big idea three, connect the river and complete the path system. So Dover Cole, you might recall, they were the design consultants for the downtown master plan and also for the North Riverside Parks and Trails master plan. And this site is immediately adjacent to Hal's Riverwalk, which is will connect eventually to the greater trail system as it connects to downtown. And so keeping that in mind, also a direct connection between West Broadway and the river using this this long green or this new public street and public square and long green. That's kind of the centerpiece of the master plan. Parks and public spaces, so building in this long green and making amenity out of the river, river edge, the shore. This direct access down to the river might be difficult in this area because the levee is very steep here and probably very difficult to make that direct connection. But fortunately, downtown Lions Park is a block to the east, and the Parks Department has detailed plans for making some direct water access, river access from Lions Park. The long green envisioned as a place where new commercial activities can front onto the green, and the green both is simpatico with those businesses, but also just a public space where people can relax and enjoy and congregate with one another. Increased waterfront views. The master plan builds in a sustainability component and really focuses on some strategies for low impact development, bikeability and pedestrian activities, and making linkages to other parts of the community, especially linking to downtown. the sustainable practices. You'll see throughout the renderings that there are solar arrays on the roofs of all of the buildings, green roofs, trees. All of these are built into this master plan. So looking forward for strategies. Big idea 4, help solve housing and rental space affordability issues. There were three items that kept coming up no matter who we talked to on this master plan, and housing was one of those top 3 issues. The other was West Broadway, which we'll talk about in just a second. And the third was, which is related to the housing issue, that there is a lot of transient activity in this area, and providing more opportunity for this area and for people who are experiencing homelessness. And the plan, it takes a look at housing and recognizes that the cost of housing has increased exponentially in this neighborhood, or I'm sorry, not the neighborhood, but in the whole community, and how building in some strategies for how we can address that through this master plan, recognizing, of course, that this plan area isn't going to solve the issue, but can provide some strategies for at least making a dent. Partnerships, the tenant supported assistance, affordable housing targets, a lot of different strategies are recommended, and the recommendations in the master plan for about 50 to 70 of permanently affordable units, about a third of those being for households that are earning up to 30% of AMI, about a third for households between 30 and 80% of AMI, and about a third for households that are between 80 and 120% of AMI. And then the big idea number 5, create a unique entry experience to urban Missoula. The downtown master plan recognized this area as a gateway to downtown. If you're arriving to downtown Missoula from the west, particularly West Broadway, and so from the airport or other points west, as you kind of come around the corner, right now you see a site that has seen better days. And this really is, as you come around that corner and cross Russell Street, this is you're beginning to get into urbanized downtown area. And so taking recognition of that and the recommendation that this become more of a gateway experience to downtown Missoula. So maybe a signature building of some sort on the site of where the current Sleepy Inn project is right now. And maybe this all needs to be worked out, but perhaps some green space and some sculpture and some other cues that you are beginning to enter the urbanized core of the city. West Broadway, I mentioned, was one of the one of the topics that kept coming up again and again and again. If you'll recall, the boundary for the master planning area was drawn on the south side of West Broadway. It did not include West Broadway, but it came up so often, and everybody said, as a pedestrian, or if you live in this area or work in this area, or even if you're accessing social services in this area, to get in and out by car even is very difficult. So we asked Dover Coal, we encouraged them to expand just a little bit in their planning recommendations. And they've recommended some traffic calming, mid-block crossing, and the potential of a roundabout at the Toole, California, West Broadway to at this intersection, this difficult intersection, where MDT this is an MDT route. MDT has been at the table, and they recognize that that this would not be included as part of the Russell Street. Maybe it doesn't occur immediately. We obviously need to do a lot more study, but it's very clear that we need to have more mitigation for West Broadway if we're ever going to have a successful development in this West Broadway master planning site. This is the illustrative plan, the full build out. So street fronting buildings, a lot of green space, street trees, complete streets, if you will. And then the master plan walks through from today's conditions. The city owns these two parcels. Initial build out, perhaps the Sleepy Inn site is developed first. The Missoula water site gets developed. And as I mentioned, within that site, the city can put in some of the public infrastructure, like the new street and maybe some of the public green. And then longer term, the full build out as other businesses in this area choose to develop their properties. The master plan did not specifically include north of West Broadway, but Dover Cole, we really appreciate that they look beyond the limits of the project and made some recommendations for what might occur on the north side of West Broadway as well. So just pulling it all together, the proposed development program is for about 20 to 30,000 square feet of leasable commercial retail space, which would be somewhere between 8 and 15 new shops and stores. 10 to 15,000 square feet of office space. So ideally a workplace for 4 to 8 new workplaces and community spaces. 100 to 130 market rate townhomes and apartments, so new housing, 100 to 130, and then that 50 to 70 affordable units that we talked about just a little bit ago. Between 140 and 160 parking spaces, because parking is always an integral part, but you need to really find that balance. So really trying to lean a little bit on transit-oriented development and the proximity of this site to downtown, and planning around 30 units to the acre. Then the master plan goes through an implementation recommendations and a whole matrix of how each of the big ideas, who might take the lead on the implementation, and some strategies for how that implementation might occur. And with that, so our next steps, this was put together a few days ago as we started the approvals process. We presented this for approval at the BID board on Tuesday of this week, and it was approved. We presented it to the planning board on Tuesday evening of this week, and also was approved there. Presented yesterday to the City Council's Land Use and Planning Committee, and the public hearing for City Council is scheduled for December 6th. We're here today presenting to the MRA board. Tonight we'll present to Neighborhood Forum, and we hope that City Council will take final action on December 13th, and we will be able to submit a final plan to the Big Sky Trust Fund at the end of the year. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and just turn it back to the board.
Thank you, Annette. Questions for Annette or anybody? Yes, Nancy.
I just have a couple of comments, and looking at the plan, it's very well put together, and the participation was participation in the planning was creative, and the resources were well used in putting this together. The implementation, I think you would find very interesting. The cover sheet, again, cover sheets should be dated, just before I forget to say that.
Good observation. Yeah.
And it also covers the strategic goals for the city of Missoula and the public purpose of these. So this is obviously a flexible format, because the previous format for the other project was not so much a narrative as the final section is here. Maybe that's going to be part of our communication discussion to look at the use. The cover sheets are part of the project, and they do the valuable business of stating the underlying discussion and premise of MRA projects, and it's working with the city to also achieve its strategic goals. That's it.
Okay. Anything else? If not, I just have one observation, which is really not directly related to this, but you know, years ago, we had this funny grant request from these nice people to move into a funky old tire store and build a cider tasting room. You know, they understood that they were moving into a very challenging situation, and they promised that they would not only try and make a success of their business, but also stay involved in the community as things changed. And it seems like the folks at Western Cider have done that. And I think it's a wonderful example of how, you know, this little bit of funding we gave them just over the years just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and gets a point where, I mean, you know, this is certainly not a final place, but to go from where this neighborhood was when they started to now it's a pretty cool thing. And the fact that they stayed involved in the whole thing is even better. So
that's an excellent observation, Carl. And they have been engaged, and they, you know, as an instance, offered up their business as a place for us to host an in-person forum for this master plan. And it was clear through the planning process that they are a valued part of that neighborhood. And they also attract people coming across the California Street Bridge. They had a lot of suggestions for how to activate the greater planning area. I think that they have long-term vision to maybe expand their business. That might include, I don't know if it's makerspace but more creative spaces that will kind of spin off of their cidery. So that's a really excellent observation.
It's just, we talk about some of these projects sometimes and hope that they'll be catalysts. And here's an example of one that clearly has been, and I think will continue to be. So,
yes. And I think you can say the same thing about Imagination Brewing.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Really? You're absolutely right. And I should have mentioned them.
Yeah,
that was even a crazier idea than putting a cidery in an old tire shop, a public interest brewery on, you know, absolutely.
Yeah, these guys are pioneers.
Yeah. So anyway, anything else from anybody? If not, is there a motion? I mean, I guess my question is this, so we're asked to approve it. Is that to just sort of provide somebody else that's reviewed it and looked at it, that was a part of it, and approve it? Or does this become some sort of official MRA plan for the?
it's less an MRA plan.
Right.
But
I
this
mean, it's ultimately the city's plan, correct?
That's right. So this will, what we're asking from City Council is to make this West Broadway master plan an amendment to the downtown master plan, which is an amendment to the city growth policy. And so, as a funder, one of the primary funders for this project, we're asking the MRA board to, I guess, if you will, endorse or approve the plan and recommend to City Council that City Council approve it as an amendment to the downtown master plan, as an amendment to the city growth policy.
Okay. All right, thank you. Is there a motion to that effect?
I can move.
I'll second it.
Okay, I was going to read it. Do we need to? I would move that the MRA board adopt the Envision West Broadway Community Master Plan in its final form and direct staff to forward the action to City Council prior to the public hearing scheduled for December 6th, 2021.
Now I'll second.
All right, gotcha. Seconded. Any additional comment? It doesn't look like anybody has their hand up. Am I right, Joe?
Correct, Carl. No hands are raised.
All right. Okay, if not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. Annette, you've had a good week.
I thought I was going to pass out when Ellen shared that text with me. It's
All
a
right.
great week.
Well, thank you very much for your good work. You deserve it.
Appreciated. And
right.
it was, I do want to say that I was fortunate to take all of the work that's come before and pull it all together. I'm just sort of at the, I was sort of the pen, if you will. It's been really exciting to see that every step that the community has taken since the 2003 ULI plan has built, like thoughtfully built on the previous effort. And that's what is so valuable. We have such an awesome story to tell. And yeah, so I think, this is the beginning for us. I need to buckle up and dive in, but it just is a testament to how this community just thoughtfully builds and builds and builds, and puts the building blocks in place to get us where we are.
Well, thank you. All right, non-action items. Discussion of the communications plan. Ellen, did you want to lead this, or what was the thought here?
Jill will take the lead on this.
All righty.
Yeah, so I'm going to start out with just saying that this process that we're doing with Six Pony Hitch has gone really fast, and we've got some identified goals that we want to meet and on a time frame. And so I was out of the office pretty much all day yesterday dealing with COVID issues in my family, having to do with close contacts with my kiddos. So I apologize, I don't have anything written really to show you, but I tried to come up with, I was just writing here as I was listening. So one of the top priorities of the communication plan, if you recall, was like kind of a strategic process with the city council. And what we've tried to do is, we've got the board is meeting with that other group, Carl and Nancy, you are the representatives on that committee, with city council and administration to talk about our priorities, MRI priorities. And that process has been going on, and there isn't anything written that's come out of that process. And Carl, you mentioned that part of that is that you kind of ran into COVID and nothing, was able to be written down and solidified between the 2 or 3 groups to this point. We need to move forward with these 2 pieces that we have engaged Six Pony Hitch to do, 2 informational pieces. One is, what is tax increment financing? I'm going to share my screen really quick here because I started writing this. So I tried to write down kind of where we are with this process so you could see it. So hopefully everybody's seen this communication plan outline. We have engaged Six Pony Hitch to kind of start out with getting some of those low-hanging fruit things done in the plan. Two pieces, the tax informational piece, what is tax increment financing, and the other piece is kind of case studies of MRA projects and that support our current priorities. We've also asked Spider to come up with like a draft Engage Missoula outline of how we would take these priorities that we're going to talk about today and agree on and put those out on the Engage Missoula website and gather feedback from the community to re-engage the community in what we do here at MRA. The other two pieces are more informational and educational, which we feel like are very, very important to put on our website and to have available to City Council and other city staff, both in an electronic digital form and in a hard copy form to show to the public. So back up here at the top, the recommendation, what we need, number one now, or I should have said what our ask is today, is to have a discussion and dialogue with the board to identify MRA priorities to use in these communication products. I am going to, let's see, share another screen that what we've done today where I started writing this is the staff got together and really looked at state law, the projects we've done historically, and kind of how we evaluate projects as they come in the door. Because if you remember in the communication plan later on, one of the recommendations is we really need to come up with a policy or procedure that how we process these projects that come in, that we have check boxes that we can kind of go through of what the public benefit is and how this project meets those priorities. So it's really easy to communicate to the public that that's our process and this is why we approved those projects. And so kind of trying to tie those recommendations that come later on in the communication plan to doing what we do now, how we can do that now. So the staff did a exercise during our staff meeting a few weeks ago, and I think I pulled that up here. Give me a second. Has everybody seen this kind of thing that looks like a flower? Hopefully. Carl?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. So this is kind of just the staff process. We wanted to take a look at what MRA does and how it supports the strategic goals of the city that have already been adopted through that process. Community livability, we felt, was the number one city strategic goal that we support, because everything that we do in MRA and our urban renewal plans support making an area better and a more livable space and area. Coming off of the community livability, the staff came up with all of these things that we often look at when we look at projects and what we're doing. And you know, they also are supported through state law. You can tie those back to historic preservation is something that we can support, parks and trails. We do environmental quality type of improvements, such as our deconstruction over demolition, that kind of thing, and certain elements in projects. Streets and sidewalks, housing. We do a lot of support of publicly owned facilities. Infrastructure such as water, sewer, power. We reinvest in the built environment. Our facade program is an example of that. Economic vitality. And I think I covered social and cultural investment. We also do a lot of that when it comes to, we felt like that was important. We have a category that we look at when we look at our project list, such as the Western Montana Mental Health Center, or if we're supporting public art, those kind of things. Kind of felt that is where that came out of. And then of course, down here at the bottom, we really felt like these public-private partnerships have to happen at the beginning, and in order to support some of the public benefit projects that we do down the line. So that was just our first exercise. And Spider, working with Spider, has asked us, like, we really want to keep it simple And Spider is on today's meeting. So if we have questions of Spider, I asked her to be here to help with this process. We want to keep it simple and narrow down those priorities for the board. Stop sharing here for a second. I'm going to go out to our website. And on the website, we have created some graphs and charts for the public to see where our funds have been going the last 2 fiscal years. So hopefully now you're seeing the website and the charts for fiscal year 2021. We start out with the very beginning of just the breakdown between the public-private partnerships and the public projects that we've done and the percentages. And I know I emailed this link out earlier to the board, so you've seen this already. Then we go into private partnerships versus the breakdown between small businesses and commercial. As you can see, we did, more small business projects, just looking at the numbers of projects. And then we broke it down on the public private partnerships. Where were they small businesses? Were they large? And then what the unique one that we did this last fiscal year, of course, was the Union Block, and there was the historic preservation. And then we get to this chart that shows just the breakdown on our public projects and what types of public projects that we do. And so Ellen did this exercise looking at everything that we've done the last 2 fiscal years and really categorizing those and looking at the numbers. I pulled the numbers then out of all of our financial reports. So you can see a large percentage of funds was spent on public buildings and housing, and then parks and trails. And then this is our infrastructure category. Over here, we also spend a lot of money some years and a little bit of money some years, other years on just redevelopment plans like what Annette just presented. So going back to this one. So working with Spider, we tried to narrow down from 10 to just, we came up with, your 2 that you've always said is infrastructure and housing. But infrastructure is really, really broad. And we felt like it would just be better to break that out into pieces a little bit because not everybody thinks of infrastructure the same way. So what we've come up with the last week actually is really when we're doing this process is keeping housing is one of the priorities, including infrastructure, but breaking out parks and trails into a separate category that we can highlight through these case studies. Economic vitality, because that really covers all of our smaller public-private partnerships, because that's a large category. They're all supporting economic vitality, and some of our larger projects, such as the Merc or AC Hotel. Then the infrastructure would be more our streets and sewers and power. So these 2 would be one priority is infrastructure. And then the other 2 big areas that we've spent funds that Spider and I talked about recommending for the board to consider including in the priority list would be the publicly owned facilities, because we really have spent a large investment in, for example, the library and the police facility and the records facility out in Nerd 3 for the county election center, the county courthouse renovations, and then of course some school improvements to Hellgate High School when Hellgate was included in Nerd 1 years ago. So that was really kind of a category that we felt should be included in the priorities the board considers and approves in per conversation today. And then the other one was historic preservation, because we really felt like the community values historic preservation, as do we. And we've done some very significant projects that involve historic preservation, like the Wilma, the Merc, and then of course the most recent Union Block, to name the larger ones. So I guess I'll turn it over to Ellen for her comments. Ellen's probably hearing this for the first time as far as the discussion about including historic preservation and publicly owned facilities, because we really were focusing on the other 4 at first, and looking at projects in our project list to start talking about case studies for that second piece that Spider's working on for us. And then Spider's on too, that she can chime in. So I'll stop.
Ellen? For Spider?
So I don't have much to add to this. I think in an effort to try to stay as laser focused as we could, we were trying to reduce the number of categories that we tried to represent graphically. But I think there's an argument to be made for all of those things on that hub and spoke wheel that Jill showed you. And that's going to be Spider's challenge is how do we take the breadth of what, and it's ours as well, but how do we take the breadth of what we do as an agency and what we invest in, and kind of boil it down to, for lack of a better term, sound bites that are easily digestible and understandable by the public. And that's no easy task, just because it's just the range of things that we do and the impacts that those have. So, and I think in this effort, the one thing that I personally want to ram home is that without the public-private partnerships, we don't build any of the public projects. That's where the money comes from. And it's very difficult to hear people say we shouldn't be investing in things like the MERC or the AC or, you name it. If we don't invest in those things, if we aren't a catalyst for those happening and happening better, we don't have the revenue to go out there and build another section of trail or another bridge across the river. It's quite that simple. And so, I mean, to me, if there's one central message in this, and if there's one piece of misinformation out there, it is that we should not be doing those private projects. If we shouldn't be doing the private projects, we should not be pretending to have tax increment.
So before you turn to Spider, I'm sorry, and maybe I missed something here. What are we being asked to, as a board, what are we being asked to do?
And I'll speak to that. My understanding is that we're asking the board to agree on these priorities, because we don't want to start creating pieces of information that we are going to communicate without the board saying, yeah, we agree. This is, the staff got together and said, this is what we think. We narrowed it down to what we think are the top priorities for MRA, and how those support the overall strategic plan and the priorities of the community that the city has adopted. And so we're asking you really to give us the go ahead that, yes, we agree that out of those 10, the 6 that you've identified and narrowed down, we like those. And we're going to, then Spider can move forward.
So can you quickly say what those 6 are?
That would be helpful to me too.
They are, housing, infrastructure, including streets, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, water, sewer, power, telecommunication lines.
Basically streets and utilities.
Parks and trails, including the bridges, because those are part of our overall trail systems. Economic vitality. That encompasses all of our, public-private partnerships. Publicly owned facilities. And historic preservation.
Okay, can I ask one more question, please?
Yep.
So then, in terms of the, whatever you call this, that's on our screen, right?
This is the only graphic that I had to show you that to show the staff process. So this is not something that we're going to.
Right, but I mean, if you look at those headings, we're not including environmental quality necessarily as a separate thing, right? Although it would be included in various ones of these.
Correct.
You know, the hard thing with this is what we have here is apples and oranges.
Right.
And so how do you boil it down to, 4 or 6 broad categories? I mean, I would argue economic vitality underpins all of these.
Right. Right. And they overlap.
Mm-hmm.
So these then become essentially the themes that Spider is working with. Is that right? Spider, is that what I'm asking?
Yeah. So let me give you a little context. So this comes from the problem we're trying to solve is that people think that sometimes MRA projects are arbitrary, or they're the word cronyism, or some of the things that came up that people just really don't understand how you pick projects. So it's really just putting a process to something you already do and then communicating that process. So it's saying, when we look at a project, the priorities that we have are economic vitality, but that still can be like, if it's just one big umbrella, people don't really get it. So when they hear like, yeah, we look at projects that address infrastructure or historic preservation or public buildings, and they start to see, okay, and you can say, here's a project, it addresses our priority of historic preservation, it fits this plan. And then people are like, oh, okay, there's a process, I get why you're doing it. And then we're hoping to do an Engage Missoula process too, to just put it out there to the community. Hey, here are the priorities we've been working with. Are we missing something that's important to the community? And get some community feedback on that so that there is buy-in from the greater community. Like, we know that housing, obviously, we just heard that in Annette's presentation, housing is everything. So clearly, okay, MRA has said that housing is priority. That said, we also have to communicate every time, to Ellen's point. Our first priority is to get the money to be able to do public projects. But when we look at projects, this is sort of our criteria. Does that make sense? So checklist.
Yes.
So you want to have a list that's understandable to the public, broad enough to incorporate the projects that you're doing. So you don't want to be too narrow so that you can't do a project, but you want to make it specific enough that people get that they're, it's not just a loosey-goosey kind of decision-making process, which we all know it's not, but people aren't getting that.
Okay. Ruth?
So yeah, so I'm going to call it the flower graphic. So if it ends up looking anything like that, if the public goes to the website, it's sort of an invitation of what we want to hear from the public. What kind of projects we want submitted. Is that correct? That it's sort of an invitation?
I think so. I think what the Engage, and this will be like my first experience using Engage in Missoula. I mean, we've used it for a couple of our projects that Annette's worked on to gather feedback. So it's that interaction. So we really want to put on Engage Missoula and our website, these are our priorities. This is how we vet projects and check the boxes for, the projects that we review and approve. They check these boxes, and these priorities support the overall, goals of the city and what's important to the city and the community as adopted by the city's strategic plan. And so we are asking then, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Spider, but my understanding is that we're going to ask for this public feedback in a variety of ways. And I think what recommendation is, we recommend the public to provide feedback through Engage Missoula, comment on, on what we've presented, provide feedback through your city council members, contact them and let them know how you feel about MRA's priorities and how we vet our projects. And the third way would be to attend a board meeting and engage in the MRA process itself. Spider, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so what we talked about was that the most important thing to do now is to let people know, okay, we did this whole process, we listened to the community, and this is what we're going to do about it. We heard that you don't really understand, we want to be more transparent. So here are the priorities that we work with now based on input that we've gotten from the city that that had levels of engagement. And here's some additional ways, if you have things that we're not addressing, that you can say, we'd like you to address X. So there's some public engagement, buy-in on these priorities.
So it's an educational piece on our priorities and criteria.
Yeah, so the pieces that we're building are, here's how TIF works and here's how it relates to our priorities. This, it's not, we're just randomly giving money to our friends, which is, sometimes been said. It's like, we really focus on, we do focus on, this is where our money goes. And then, Jill made those great graphics that say, come look at where our money's gone. Like, it all fits together. It all makes sense.
Yes, Nance.
I don't understand. We're trying to invite or incite participation, or if we are trying to easily explain the basis for MRA projects when people go to our website. Because when people have questions about a project, they go to the website and then they either understand it from the website or they don't. So I don't know if we're trying to get them in the door or explain what we've done. So that's it.
I'd say both, Nancy. We're trying to do a better job of communicating how we vet the projects that come in the door, and also our priorities internally when we're looking at internal projects. Obviously, sidewalks and infrastructure are a priority for the board in our districts because look at the projects we've done in NER 2 and NER 3. And so moving forward, when we get these priorities, really locked in place, we can develop more graphically and through our staff memos, like Annette used the cover sheet today. That was a direct result of us talking about how we can implement the recommendations in the communication plan in a way that down the line is going to be even easier for the public to understand, like a summary page that, you can insert, graphics that represent the priorities, like a graphic for parks and trails, and that can be so it's easier for them to see in a digital world, but also on the written form too, if they were to just pull up the memo, in a written form. So there's that piece of kind of melding that in. So I think we're trying to do both. We're trying to, re-engage with the community about what we do, help educate them about what we do and how it works, and then ask them to respond and provide us feedback. Eleanor Spider?
You already have priorities. If you look at the data, it's really clear that you have priorities. It's just that the public isn't clear on what those priorities are. So we're trying to just say, these are the kinds of projects that MRA funds. So when something comes in, I'm just trying to really get past the fact that what you do is not arbitrary. What you do.
So you're trying to put some sense into the 45-page spreadsheet. No, seriously, there's, okay.
Yes.
So what we heard, and Nancy, this is a question for you and for Ellen. It seems to me that what we heard from the initial discussions that we had with City Council is that what they wanted to make sure that our priorities were housing and infrastructure was defined quite broadly. And infrastructure, I thought, at least my understanding, included such things as parks and trails and public buildings.
And historic preservation, for that matter.
Right. With an understanding, of course, that there had to be economic, right, that we had to have money to do this. That's what economic, and a viable economy here And so I think this fits in with what we were hearing from them. Do you, Ellen?
I do. I think we've gotten broader than the discussions that I recall with that working group, because there seemed to be a laser focus on housing and infrastructure. And I think, you know, how you define infrastructure may be part of the key to that.
Right, and those are also discussions about where we go in the future, which might be more of a laser focus on housing, but that's not really what Spider, and as I understand it, it's not really what Spider's asking us, or asking that's not the only, we're not just talking about the future when we talk about how we're presenting stuff on our webpage. We're also talking about what we've done in the past so that people understand what we've done. And certainly, Nancy, you know, you remember a time where the primary focus was trails, right?
Among other things, I mean.
Right. So.
Yeah, it seems to me we had two former board members named Ron and Hal who had a great love for trails.
Right.
Thus, Missoula has an amazing trail system.
But part of our analysis has also included jobs.
Right.
And when we look at the economic impact of a project, that's something that we looked at. And what kind of jobs are being created. And if they were just moving jobs from sector to sector in the city and the county, or whether they were actually new jobs.
And that's something that in our little working group with the city, Chris has continued to point out to people is that, you know, don't forget that for the longest time, it was jobs, 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 and jobs. And it's only very recently that we've said something other than that.
We tried to pick the categories that would pretty much like cover like everything. Like the jobs would be economic vitality. So if a project came in and we had to vet it through our priorities, we'd say, well, okay, this meets housing, but it also meets, you know, economic vitality because it's creating jobs. And, you know, we're also doing water, sewer, and power extensions, main extensions. And so you would see those little checks, you know, in a graphic form more so than, you know, like right now we don't have any graphics. And so I think, you know, people don't, I don't think people read very much anymore, present company excluded. You know, the younger generation, they're all digital, and, you know, having those really pop out and not having to, you know, them to have to drill down into the memos to really get all those public benefits, because they're all there. We always go over the public benefits of a project when we're doing the analysis, but we want to really try to highlight what those are immediately at the top, at the front, in a graphic form, and not leave anything out that I displayed in that flower graphic, but really trying to just narrow them a little bit more down to just the bigger ones that we can fit those other ones underneath.
Okay. So you want our feedback on whether or not these are category headings that you can then use as you further define the plan. Is that right? And
yes.
Okay.
Do you agree with do you agree with these priorities without doing a larger strategic plan that starts from the very beginning and it has to engage everybody? We've been doing these already.
I get it.
Let me
easily categorize individual projects.
So that we can say this project, while it didn't preserve any history, was you know, improved economic or was an economic vitality project. Is that right?
Imagine you have a dashboard in a few months and you can say we did 6 infrastructure projects, 2 historic preservation projects, 6 economic vitality. That's what we're trying to get to.
Okay.
one of the pieces that we've asked Spider to create is the complement to the TIF informational piece. She's already way, down the road with the TIF informational piece. She's given us a draft. We've provided feedback. She's working on making that better, and we've kind of pivoted a little bit. But the other complementary piece is, okay, so here's how TIF works. Now we're going to show you what the priorities of MRA, what our priorities are, and how the projects that we've completed in the past have supported those. And then moving forward, then a way that we can vet those new projects. So for example, when we're looking at the Engage Missoula site, the draft that Spider's coming up with, we're going to communicate these priorities. And so if we're looking at, for example, the Parks and Trails category, then she's asked us, okay, come up with your top 3 Parks and Trails projects and give us the amount that you've invested and 2 sentences about what that project was. Well, Parks and Trails is easy. Start with Parks, Caris, MRL, and Silver. Come up with the funds, come up with a couple sentences about what those projects were, and then here we go. And then show the graphics. Eventually, it would be great down the line, overall, when we're looking at a big map on the city's web page, and you click on that dot and that pops up, you'll see a before picture and after picture and that summary of what we did. And, there's the interaction with the public, really click, easy to see, and you've got the visuals. Trails, we've got the Ron McDonald Riverfront Trail System, the Bitterroot Trail, and the Milwaukee Trail. Huge investments from MRA over the years. And then, of course, tied to those trail systems are the bridges. We've got 4 bridges: California, North Reserve Scott Street, the Reserve Street, and the Madison Street Underbridge. Right there, that one's an easy category. And then we jump to maybe historic preservation, and then we'd highlight 3 projects there. So that's kind of like that complementary piece that we're tying to the TIF informational piece that we're trying to get done before we onboard the new council members. And that was really Ellen's brainstorm there. We really would want those to be available so we can, come and show them what we do.
And that might not be realistic. We may have the what is TIF piece, which would be very helpful. But we do onboarding every couple of years. So
just conceptually, to be able to tell them, they're going to be familiar with our community, and to say, we participated in those projects. I think to tell them those things would be very helpful, even if we don't have the artwork to go with it yet.
Well, there's a list that I put together probably a year and a half ago where I just listed projects that this community values. And it was the parks, it was the affordable housing, it was the trails, it was the investment in the social community or social services community like Western Montana Mental Health, et cetera. And it's a pretty darn impressive list. And I did that for the city council members. It's almost a cheat sheet. And I think it's been shared with you guys in the past, probably a good while ago. But we'll probably have that available. And I may add some projects that have occurred since that was created to the list. But that really gives you a broad picture of the things that we have invested TIF funds in that this community values. From the carousel to the underbridge, public art to historic preservation. So I think, we've got all the pieces. They're just not in a form that is easily digestible in today's world. Nobody wants to sit and read a list of projects on the website. They want to see pictures. And so, and maybe what's warranted here is a working session with the board and staff and Spider to just really drill into this and focus on it. Or maybe you're comfortable with where we're going and want to give us a direction today. I'm good either way.
I'm totally comfortable with what you have here. I think this makes sense. Some projects are going to hit more than one category, or more than 2 categories, honestly. But the 6 seems to encompass, the big ones. I like the other representation as well. It has a few other discrete areas that could be, I'd say, semi-priorities maybe. But this all seems great. We get these beautiful master plans, and there are all these artistic representations and description. So when Annette was just presenting with like the words, like the before words and then the afterwards, you know, things like that. That's how we connect to our community. And I see this as being valuable, and I'm satisfied with the 6 personally. Say, go on. I want my PowerPoint presentation. Yeah.
Well, we've gone from an 8.5 by 11 to an 11 by 17 trifold. So
yeah.
So the only, I'll go along with Tasha on this. I'd leave it up to the, I mean, I've proven that I'm bad at this, so my suggestions might not be, I mean, take my suggestions with a huge grain of salt. I think the word jobs need to be included in here somewhere, because it was a huge priority and remains a big priority. I mean, even though we're now in this period where people are looking for employees, that's pretty unusual. It's damned unusual.
well, I think it'd be easy enough to have economic vitality and job creation.
Right. And I'm not trying to wordsmith. I mean, you know, you guys, you're the experts on the wordsmithing, and that's my only comment.
Well, we ask about job creation on the application form for every project that comes to you that involves the private sector.
Right. Ruth.
Well, we also ask about sustainability practices with every project, and that wasn't its own petal on that flower. And one thing that has come up in public conversations recently that has maybe not been a priority for us is equity. That we heard a lot about that with the Midtown Association, and I appreciate that they're looking at that, and that is going to be a priority for them. And I wonder if in the future that might not be something for us to consider as well.
Well, I guess my response on both sustainability and equity is those ought to underpin everything we look at.
Yes. So where does it fit in?
Category of their own.
Right, but that's like, but that's more, right, but isn't that more of a criteria that we use? I mean, you know, the project has to be funded too. We don't, that's not.
Right.
And
no, but I think your point's well taken, Ruth. We need to formalize that. We need to say that. You know, just like we're showing the foundational piece is the public-private partnerships that create the money that makes these projects happen. Somewhere we need to weave into this that equity and sustainability are underlying goals that projects have to address and meet certain standards.
Yeah, I agree with starting with Tasha and with what people are saying. And I think sustainability or environmental quality needs to have something there about that. Equity, I think, is a difficult word because it doesn't automatically mean infrastructure. It doesn't mean street sidewalks. It doesn't mean housing. Maybe it's housing. I mean, it's equity needs a definition. And I don't feel, and I hear other people saying, I don't feel qualified to decide how this is presented. I agree with the limited categories. I agree with presenting them on our website, and then when they're up, having board members or people try them out and see what they can find, see if they can navigate, see if it means anything to them. I think Jill gave a bunch of great examples on before and after pictures and what people would find interesting if they were looking for a specific category. We have different audiences here, a lot of different audiences when we're putting these labels on. We have investors, we have residents, we have innovators. Anyway, we have imagination. I mean, we have a lot of different audiences, and I don't know how to define those. I mean, I think that's a question. Is how you define those, and I would defer to those, and the categories all seem fine to me with my other comments.
Yeah, point taken, and I did not bring up sustainability or equity, and I'm gonna, I don't mean to speak for Carl, but even jobs, I don't think that those are being brought up to delay this process. I would like to see this process move forward, and if we do it with those 6 priorities, that's a good starting point. Let's get it out there.
It's fine with me.
Yes, Spider.
I think that Ruth, you made a really good point in that, these are priorities for types of projects, but I think that it's also important that somewhere on the website, or maybe even on these pieces, we have general criteria within each project, like they're separate things. So if the criteria is it's got to be funded, we look at it through an equity lens, a sustainability lens. I think it's nuanced, but I think you're right. It's really important. So this is like priorities for types of projects. So I think what we were looking at is it's hard to say a project is specifically an equity project.
Right.
So I think, thank you. I think that will help. We'll just add that language in. Thank you.
Anything else from anybody?
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
No, I mean that sincerely. It's a challenge, and I appreciate you taking on the challenge.
Well, as part of the work with the dealing with the resolution when it was still around to cap the funding, I mean, I went through the 45-page spreadsheet. And I didn't do it this comprehensively, but I did, make a list that it turned out I wasn't quite able to use, but we tried to do just this. And my list was, these are the iconic buildings that we've helped to maintain, and these are the trails that we've helped maintain, and these are the, we built 4 bridges and X miles of trails, and these are the small businesses that we helped. So I think that I agree with the idea that in order to make sense of what we're doing, we need to categorize things. And I agree that the categories are great.
And to the extent that we can tie them in with the city goals, although the city goals may not be delineated or identified either.
So,
Okay.
have you got enough vague direction from the board to proceed with the work that we don't know how to do?
So we really appreciate it. It's been challenging to look at what we've done and then come up with a process of moving forward and how we can showcase what we've done in an easily understandable and digestible way. Like we all want to get to the same place, and that is communicating what great things we do for the community.
All right. All right. So let's finish up here. Ellen, anything on the director's report?
No, only if there are questions.
Okay. What do you mean you're going to be gone for 2 weeks, for 15 days?
Going to Mexico.
Oh, God.
Dance in the sand.
All right. Be careful.
I go every year.
Okay.
This year just happens to come over top of a board meeting.
Okay.
Or maybe we're staying longer. I don't know.
What do you mean you're staying longer? Now, wait a minute. That sounds ominous, doesn't it?
This annual pilgrimage started out as about a week or a little over a week, and every year we add a few.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'm not moving to Mexico yet.
Okay. And Joe, we
I don't have anything special on the budget reports. I did a summary memo. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we did get the final mill levies, and that's the biggest change that you'll see in the budget documents. That adjusted column will have the new revenue amounts.
Anything surprising there?
No, the only thing that I would say that we still are waiting on from DOR is just any adjustments on any appeals adjustments. And they said they would have those to us hopefully by the end of November.
Okay. The committee, I'll give it to Nancy or I'll give a quick committee report in terms of meeting with the council and folks and city administration. We met again. We still are moving forward. No great. There was, I think, some notion of sort of the idea of the cap was, there were a lot of questions. I think there's a general agreement that there are a lot of questions about that. And so there's sort of this notion of, well, so how do you do this? If you want to talk about what's, beforehand, what's the right size, or at what size does a tax increment district become more than you want it to be? How do you evaluate that? And so they're sort of looking at ideas of thinking about that. The cap maybe wasn't the right approach, but no one's got another idea for what might be the right approach. Although I don't know quite how to say this, but I know I learned in part of this process, for example, that Oregon's law caps the percentage of land. So you can't have more than X percent of the land within. But anyway, it's still the ongoing discussions, good discussions. Still very clear to me that there is general agreement. What did they, Nancy, what was the phrase they used about MRA is our star or something like that, at the beginning. And then when they asked me what I wanted, I said, I think I want to still be considered the star or something.
I think the word was hero.
Hero, right, hero. So, I mean, it's a good discussion. It really is. Just to make sure that there isn't something out there that we're not aware of. I think it serves that purpose, but nothing on coming down the pike dramatically in the near future. Unless they decide to move while Ellen's in Mexico and
And I just say,
so that's
I'm gonna knock them all.
that's the committee report. Anything else from anybody? If not, here's hoping that we get to meet in person one day and see you all in person. Otherwise,
Happy Thanksgiving.
have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in December.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Paul.
Thank you,
We're
everybody.
adjourned.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Good piece of work today.
We're adjourned.